everybody to the October 21st, 2021 all members meeting. And I'd like to just extend my appreciation for everybody taking the time to be here in busy times. And so with that, I'd like to have everybody give a quick introduction, please, if you are a voting member or participating member of the Poverty and Homelessness Board. And we'll start with myself. I'm Chris McAllister. I'm the chair. I currently represent lived experience on the Poverty and Homelessness Board. And I'm going to go with Commissioner Farr as my second.
Thank you, Chair McAllister. Pat Farr, Board of County Commissioners. I was been on the Poverty and Homelessness Board since its inception.
And Pat, will you name somebody?
Oh, thank you. How about Donna Butera?
Thank you. Hi, I'm Donna, and I am the McKinney-Vento Liaison for Bethel School District. So I provide support services and specialize in education rights of students who experience homelessness. And I'm brand new to the board, so I'm learning. Thank you.
Brittany Quick-Warner.
Hi everyone, Brittany Quick-Warner. I'm the president and CEO of the Eugene Area Chamber of Commerce, business representative on the board, and I'll toss it to Cheryl.
Good afternoon, Cheryl Balthrop, and I serve as the executive director of the Eugene Mission, and I will toss it to David Haverland.
Hey, good afternoon. Dave Haverland, the Community Employment Coordinator for the United States Department of Veterans Affairs and the Employment Work Group Chair. And Mike Fleck, you're up.
Well, I don't think I'm actually on the board yet, but I'm Mike Fleck. I'm a Cottage Grove City Councilor, and I'm item 3 on your agenda as a potential board member.
Thank you. Mayor Venus.
Oh, thanks.
Good afternoon, Lucy Venus, Mayor of Eugene. I guess I'm supposed to kick it to someone, but I chimed in late, so I don't know who's left on the list.
Dr. Foster.
Dr. Willie Foster, and I'm the newly appointed healthcare representative on the board, and excited to be here.
Thank you. Sheriff Harold.
Afternoon all, Cliff Harold, your Lane County Sheriff.
Thank you. Debbie Farr.
Hi everybody, Debbie Farr. I'm with Trillium Community Health Plan, one of the CCOs in Lane County.
Jacob Fox.
Hey everybody, Jacob Fox, Executive Director with Homes for Good, representing public housing authorities.
Thank you. Catherine. Catherine Ryan.
There we go. Sorry, I couldn't find the button. Hi, I'm Catherine. I am with Pacific Source, the Lane County CCO. And I just want to really quick, I'm going to drop in the chat. We're having kind of a community open conversation around some of our health equity work on November 3rd and would love to have any of you folks attend. So I'll just throw that in over there. Thanks.
Thank you. Matthias.
Matthias Smith, Homeless Youth Representative.
Thank you. And Julie? Sorry, Julie Weissman.
Julie Weissman, Executive Director of the Hope and Safety Alliance, formerly Women's Space, and I am the representative of Victim Services.
Excellent. Sean Murphy.
Sean Murphy, I'm the Executive Director of Laurel Hills Center, and I represent mental health on the Poverty and Homelessness Board.
Excellent. And Susan Lopez.
Good afternoon, Susan Lopez, Victim Services Representative and Chair of the Youth Homelessness Solutions Work Group, and we're super excited about our new grant.
Excellent. I apologize, the list keeps moving. Have I missed any voting or representing members?
I'm here. My name is Julie Lambert, and I'm a participant with lived experience, And I also serve on the Human Rights Commission Poverty and Homelessness Board.
Thank you, Julie. Julie's a member of our league and is our newly appointed league chair. And so she's in observance here, but is not a voting member of the Poverty and Homelessness Board. So thank you very much for being here, Miss Julie. And I also see that Lori Traeger is present.
Good morning. Yes, I'm Commissioner Farr's alternate from the Board of County Commissioners. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for being here. We have a very packed agenda, and we do have several people with some time certain exits. So without further ado, thank you, everybody, for being here. And can we get a motion to approve our minutes in a second and any alterations?
I'll motion to approve.
And I'll
Thank you.
second it.
Thank you. That's motioned by Matthias and seconded by
Mayor Venice.
Mayor Venice. Thank you. Any discussion, any corrections?
A clarification, Chair, is this the entire consent calendar?
Yeah, this is the this was the minutes, but we can make this for the entire consent agenda if that's where we are. So this was for the minutes. Is there any corrections? Hearing none, I'd like to, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed, signify by saying nay. Hearing none, the minutes pass, and the rest of the consent calendar, I'd like to ask if there is any additions or alterations before moving to vote on it. Hearing none, can we please get a motion to approve the financials?
I move to approve the financials.
Thank you. Can I get a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. That's motioned and seconded. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 All, any opposed, please signify by saying nay. Hearing none, our consent calendar fully passes. Thank you very much. And thank you for drawing the distinction there, Commissioner Farr. Next on our agenda, we have membership update. Amanda, will you please take lead?
Sure. Hi, Amanda Borda with Lane County Human Services Division. I'm filling in for Alex Dreher today. So on the membership update, Alex let me know that we have one nomination for the rural elected official position, which is Mike Fleck, Cottage Grove City Councilor. That position was posted and open for 1 month, and we received that one application. I believe that has been approved by the membership committee. And so that is coming to this body today for a final approval. So I think we are looking for a motion to approve.
I move to approve.
I second.
Okay, so that was moved by Brittany and seconded by
Sue Lopez.
Sue Lopez. Thank you. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed, please signify by saying nay. Hearing none, motion carries. Well, welcome to our board, and look forward to serving with you. Would you like to take a moment to share things? We do have about a minute for you to be able to introduce yourself.
Oh, you bet. So I'm actually in my 4th term as a city councilor, and with that and planning commission, I have about 20 years that I've been volunteering for the city of Cottage Grove. I love doing it. In my day job, actually, I run Community Sharing Program, which is a community service center that the HSC funds. So I will most likely have to recuse myself on rare occasion, but definitely declare potential conflicts as time goes forward. But I think that'll also bring an awful lot of insight into, you know, the HMIS and other, you know, areas that this group oversees. So I'm thrilled to be part of the group, and happy to help any way I can. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor, and we certainly look forward to having the voice of the rural community. This seat has been open for a while now, and look forward to seeing what Cottage Grove brings to this this humble body. So thank you very much.
Chair McAllister?
Yes, sir.
Just a quick reminder that this will be forwarded to the Board of County Commissioners ultimately for ratification. It'll be on a consent calendar, I believe, a week from this coming Tuesday, Mike. And it's the chair's prerogative to grant you participation and voting in this meeting today.
Thank you very much for that clarification, Commissioner Farr. I lean on you for some of this more technical experience. Next on the agenda, unless there's any other comments, I have a very limited view due to being on an iPhone currently. So I will need staff to please help keep me on track if anybody has a hand raised. Next on the agenda, we have governance concept, the 2 vice chairs. And so I'd like to say that this has 20 minutes on the agenda. If we feel like we've gone through it and someone would like to make a motion to move on it after conversation, well, we can allocate that time further on into the agenda. But that said, I would like to invite Commissioner Farr to explain the concept for us, and we'll have discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair McAllister. I think the genesis of this is the work that takes place outside of board meetings. And there's really quite a large load of work between the committees and between the between the chair and vice chair, in that agendas are set, and much of the interim work that is as enacted by the board itself, either the executive committee of the board or the full board. So it's been laying pretty squarely on the shoulders of 2 people. And I think the original discussion surrounding this called for 2 vice chairs, that one potentially could be a focus on homelessness and one could be a focus on poverty. My feeling, and the reason that I support this concept, is that it does spread the load a little bit, distributes the work in between meetings, and I believe ultimately can contribute to a more meaningful and more direct regular meeting such as this one. So with that, Chair McAllister, thank you very much. And once again, I do support this, but it's the board's decision.
Thank you very much. I wanted to share that we are the Poverty and Homelessness Board, and a lot of our work when we work on our projects focus on one end of the spectrum or the other. And by having a vice chair helping support those conversations in between meetings and helping align items to our robust committee work, I feel like we'll be able to serve a greater range than we have. And we've done amazing work with just the 2 positions currently. And so this is why I wanted to present this idea before this body's thoughts and consideration. So are there any thoughts regarding this concept? Anybody want to offer an alternative or give feedback? I'm scrolling through. Seeing none. Is there anybody?
Chris, it looks like Lori might have raised her hand.
Lori and Pat have raised their hand. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, Commissioner Traeger.
Thank you, Chris. And I also just wanted to check in. I wasn't sure if this was a voting member conversation or an all attendees conversation. So I was hesitating to hop in, but I guess I'm fairly agnostic on the issue. I'm just wondering about timing and sequencing of the work if we're going to head into strategic planning and consider sort of the structure of the Poverty and Homelessness Board and how the work is organized, whether this is the right sort of order of operations to consider this, or whether that's something that would be best folded into that broader strategic planning. If it's, and particularly if it requires any amount of work from staff or bylaws changes, I'm just thinking out loud about the order of operations more than a thumbs up or down on the concept. I'm all for sharing leadership and making folks able to specialize and get work done. But that's my main question about this.
Those are certainly positive and productive questions, and I can do a direct response if I may, and then open it back up to Commissioner Farr if his hand is still up. And that said, the reason why I presented it at this current time is we are doing elections currently, and whereas we are slightly off of our normal schedule regarding elections, the leadership is who helps, at least for the year agenda, help carve the work for that year's agenda. And so this would help us actually, in my opinion, be able to focus on both poverty and homeless issues at the same time, as opposed to having it trade off based off of what current focuses are. And so that was why I think it is not only supportive of our laying out our future agenda and strategic plan, but also going to help it be a more productive and robust conversation. But those are my thoughts.
Chris, I will raise my hand.
Yeah, yes, sir. You may.
And I want to thank you for sharing your thoughts on it. I think the genesis of this, once again, was I think it came from you originally because of your work, your continued work. And really, what we know that there's a robust committee structure in the the Poverty and Homelessness Board. But significantly, I'll tell you something that just happened to me recently. I had a conversation with a newly elected city councilor, who we expect a great deal from, who had no clue what the Poverty and Homelessness Board was. In fact, this new city councilor, I'm not even saying which city am I, but this new city councilor started talking to me about a board that we should have in the county that represents the jurisdictions and maybe represents law enforcement. And I said, well, gosh, we have one. And once I explained this to the new city councilor, they said, well, by golly, I've been thinking about this a long time. So it really underscores to me that we aren't deep enough in the community for everybody to understand that we already have an appointed board that really is broad, it really is deep, and it really does have the capability of addressing broader issues than even the Human Services Commission, because it goes further county-wide. So consequently, I'm in favor of this because it will help us in our efforts to make the Poverty and Homelessness Board a little bit more mainstream in the understanding of the different jurisdictions in the county. So I'm in favor of it, and I'm prepared to make a motion at such point as you're ready for it, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, sir. Would anybody else like to weigh in on this item? As it affects our governance, it gives us more tools in the toolbox, so to speak, but it would mean one more person going to executive committee, and it would be one more person helping set the agenda. Is there any staffing consideration that we need to do differently in reflection of Commissioner Traeger's comments? Amanda or Steve?
I had made a similar comment previously when this came up at the executive committee meeting about the timing. And it just seems like this is a decision that's being made for the balance of this term, and the Poverty and Homelessness Board is both the Continuum of Care Board for our HUD homeless programs and also is responsible as the administrative board for our anti-poverty programs. So I think the idea is to add some depth and to have somebody who's in leadership on the Poverty and Homelessness Board who is trying to focus on people who are housed and in poverty and their needs, given that a lot of the focus has been on just the homeless population. And in terms of staffing, I don't think that it would have a significant, and I think I asked Alex previously, but it didn't require a change per se in our governance charter, I believe.
Chairman
Thank
McAllister?
Yes, sir. I apparently had my mute on still. I apologize. Thank you very much, Steve, for that clarification and that staff standpoint. I see that Julie has a hand raised, and then Commissioner Farr.
I'm just thinking, I mean, I actually, like Lori, like the idea of co-leadership, you know, having two vice chairs. I think this committee is this board is quite large, and there are, as Commissioner Farr said, lots of committees. So sharing the burden of duties and responsibilities of chair, I think it's a great idea. My only unsurety is the distinction of one representing poverty and one representing homelessness. Is there a described kind of qualifications to be one who steps forward and says, I'll be this one who represents poverty for this board, and I'll be the one that represents homelessness? It's like, or is it just self-appointed to just show up? So I want to make sure that we're writing in a responsibility of speaking for those, representing those issues on behalf of the board. And I'm just curious on how that would happen. You know, I got appointed because I'm a victim services representative, because I actually lead a victim services agency. So that was my only kind of like, wasn't really sure. I appreciate what we're doing, but I wasn't sure what the qualifications would be.
Yes, ma'am. And as the author of this request, I can speak to what I was thinking, and it's open to this body to help define this. With that in mind, my thoughts were through the nomination process. We, as members of this body, are familiar with the work that we are doing, and who we're working with, and who's working on items. And so when we look at it through the lens, if someone says Julie would be a great representative for poverty issues, I think that I'd like to nominate her for vice chair of the poverty. And so I felt that that would help with this democratic and conversation process, but I'm open to feedback about how we might want to consider it otherwise. I do know that we have to elect a chair and vice chair, and it seemed prudent to, if we're going to add another position, to possibly do it in that same window. And so if we define through a temporary short-term process for the remainder of this term, that could be one way, and we can think it out deeper if we'd like, and put more terms on it, or we can set terms otherwise. I see several things popping up in the chat, so I'm going to mute my mic and read the chat real quick. Is there anybody with their hand up? Seeing none. We have a question, two side questions. Lori Traeger says, please clarification, this co-chair would be one of the current 16 voting members, and I would say yes, under that, because we are trying to build this within our current charter without having to change it if we didn't have to. And so that would be under that premise. Side question, Cheryl Balthrop has said, at what point would it be appropriate to discuss or consider voting member criteria for the Lane County Board of Commissioners consideration? And Commissioner Farr responded that he thought that it would be it could be brought up as an agenda item for the next meeting, and said it was a good question. So those are all the comments so far on this topic. Would anybody like to speak further about whether they want more information, whether or not we should consider other items, or whether or not we should call this to a vote?
Yes, Chair, could I chime in?
Yes, ma'am.
So I did want to follow up on Commissioner Trieger's comments about timing and the question that Cheryl Balthrop has just suggested. And so I do think that this is, if I agree that I think committees are always stronger when the workload is shared, and that and I think a broader governance leadership is always healthy for an organization. So I support this concept, but I do think that recognizing that we are about to go through a strategic plan, and we have incorporated into that, a sort of a deep dive into what are the kind of key mission purpose of this board. So I guess I don't want it really written in stone, because I'm happy to do this. It seems like a good transitional thing, but just keeping in mind that there may be other ways in which we look at how the committee structure works and everything else as a result of that strategic planning process. So just, I think to think of this as kind of transitional helps us get through this year, helps us maybe realign our focus, follow our work plan more consistently. That all sounds good to me, but I will also say that, well, yeah, I think that's enough. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, Commissioner Traeger, Commissioner Farr, Ms. Balthrop, and Ms. Weissman. I want to also speak to a caveat. Perhaps let's see how it goes for 3 months and see if we want to revisit with assignments. That would be a possible caveat to this motion. So if it's not working, or if we feel like we want to do away with the title focuses, knowing that it is now balanced between 3 people to make sure all these items are attended to, if that makes people feel more comfortable about pursuing this, I'm certainly open to that. I just want to make sure that we're doing the right things for the right reasons, and having a brain trust that's motivated and moving the agenda forward in a way that's productive is the main goal. So I'd like to invite those who've asked questions to see if that caveat is acceptable, or if they would like to further amend before I invite Commissioner Farr to make a motion. I see Commissioner Farr.
Thank you, Chair. Then I'll craft a motion that maybe incorporates the discussion surrounding the permanence of the position. I move that the Poverty and Homelessness Board adopt a co-vice chair format and direct staff to provide any associated adjustments to the governance charter, and that the position be in effect for the balance of this term. That is to say, when we elect the next chair, when we re-elect the chair, we're behind on the process right now. So for the 3 or 6 months before we elect the next chair. So it's not a permanent position, it's a position just through the next cycle, at which point we will have concluded the discussion at the strategic planning level. Now, that's a lot of words to say that I move that we adopt a co-chair, a co-vice chair format that is temporary until the next election cycle.
Is there a second?
I'll second. Cliff Earl.
Thank you, Sheriff. Discussion. Cheryl Balthrop.
Again, I'm not speaking to this specific issue, so please forgive me, but I know that we're generally reluctant to make multiple changes to the charter. So from an efficiency perspective, we want to look at, this holistically if we're going to be examining the charter. And that's why I'm just wanting to understand, at least for me, I've looked at it, I've looked at the documents, and I'm wanting to understand, we're wanting to have a very representative group so that the Poverty and Homeless Board functions well. And perhaps someone can enlighten me even offline as to the criteria as to why certain members can vote and why certain members cannot. And obviously that this impacts me personally because the mission, I do not have a vote, and I'm trying to understand how that is determined and whether or not that's appropriate to consider if we're going to be looking at the charter, or at least so it's understood when members come on board why certain folks have the vote and why some don't.
Yes, ma'am. In direct response to that is that from what I understand in Steve's comments, that there will not be an amended charter through this temporary process with how it's been currently interpreted. I misspoke at the beginning because I thought there might have to be a charter amendment. And we have spoken about some of the charter items regarding votes. Sometimes it has to do with whether or not they receive direct monies through this process, direct conflict of interest, etc. And so we'd be happy to both raise this item about who can vote and who can't, both in terms of how to expand the voting base and help with the decision making. And, if you'd like, as a future item. I see that Steve has his hand raised.
Yeah, Chris, I'll have a broader conversation with Cheryl offline and make sure that I get information to the rest of the board on this. But the short answer is that in order to meet both the Continuum of Care Board requirements and the Anti-Poverty Board requirements, it limits the number of people who can be officially board members when we merge the two groups together. And then we're required by HUD to have groups like the Housing Authority and some other representatives be on the board. But I think in examining a different board structure, there may be a different accommodation for this. And I'll just leave it at that for now. And I do think that, you know, in light of the discussions about strategic planning and charter change, you know, that it makes sense to do that as a part of that overall look at the board structure.
Thank you, Steve. Are there any other comments or questions before we finalize this with the vote, or? Seeing and hearing none, last call. Okay. Well, thank you everybody for this conversation. We are always open to revisiting things as a body, especially when it comes to representation and making sure that there's inclusion happening in this body. And so if after we make this choice, people want to revisit it, I'm open to seeing what we can do, especially given that this is not a charter amendment at this time. This is a safe place to work on furthering our democracy and inclusion. So with that, I'd like to call all in favor for establishing on a temporary basis the two-chair method, the two vice chair method, as proposed by Commissioner Farr. Please signify by saying aye or yay.
Aye.
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 Any opposed, please signify by saying nay. Hearing no nays, motion carries. Thank you everybody for this conversation and these concepts. Dialogue is how we move things forward. Going back to our agenda, we are now on item number 5, leadership elections. And so this will be an action item of voting for chair and vice chairs. And so I would like to move this over to Amanda to explain both duration of this election and the process that we will be doing.
I'm just filling in for Alex today. I don't have details other than what is up on the screen here. So she had asked me to share the leadership nominations for chair and vice chair, which is hopefully up on your screen right now. You can let me know if you don't see that. But in terms of like the term of these elections, I'm not sure, maybe Diana or Steve could clarify that.
Steve, would you be willing to?
I apologize. I don't have the information on the terms in front of me, and I can get that real quick and I'll get right back.
Thank you, sir. So this will be for the chairs and vice chairs. I would like to look at the screen, and we see that we have
Chair McAllister, I'm not able to hear you. Are you speaking?
Yes, sorry. The chat's being a little weird for me.
Okay.
I see 3 people nominated. We currently have myself, incumbent. We have Commissioner Farr, and we have Julie Weissman. Do we want to have someone confirm with all these?
Chair
people
McAllister, if this is the actual nomination, I withdraw my name from nomination. Unless you're opening it for nominations. If I've been nominated, I decline to accept the nomination.
Thank you, sir.
And I don't even know what the position entails, so I'm not even sure if I could accept the nomination for chair either.
Just for the sake of informing the public and making sure that everybody participating in this vote knows what they are voting for. Amanda, would you be willing to help us define what this role is?
Sure. Essentially the role that Chris is filling at this moment. So typically the chair will lead the meeting according to Robert's rules and the governance charter. Prior to the meeting itself, the chair will participate on the PHB executive committee to set the agendas for the upcoming meetings. And then also will participate typically in sort of moving work forward outside of the meeting as needed, or consulting with committee chairs as needed to get an update on where the work is moving forward in committees. Other than that, the staff really assist with anything in terms of writing up the agenda, the minutes, getting all of the materials out and that sort of thing. So it really entails leading and facilitating the meetings and the work of the PHB.
Given that I have only been on the PHB for less than a year and I do not know enough about it, I have to humbly decline. And so thank you, Paul, for the nomination, but I cannot accept that position.
And Chair McAllister, if I may suggest a Robert's Rules-ish process, is that you open the floor for nominations for chair, accept nominations, then close nominations, and then ask for the vote.
Yes, sir. I certainly recognize and support that. And in light of Commissioner Farr's request, would like to open up this at this time for nominations for chair of the Poverty and Homelessness Board, as described by Ms. Amanda Borda.
Chair McAllister.
Yes, sir.
I nominate Chris McAllister for chair.
I'll second the nomination.
Thank you, Commissioner Farr and Debbie Farr. I accept the nomination. Are there any other nominations that would like to be presented? Seeing none, please verify, staff, that there are none. Seeing none, I'd like to call for a vote regarding the Poverty and Homelessness Board's chair for the remainder of this term as defined by staff upon clarification. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed signify by saying nay. Hearing no nays, the motion carries. Thank you, everybody, for both your confidence and your support. I'd like to thank Commissioner Farr for his nomination and the second by Debbie. Steve?
Yes, I wanted to mention that the terms of office and why I didn't have a quick answer is typically the terms that we have used have been on the county fiscal year for the position of chair and vice chair. The elected officials who serve on this board are appointed by their jurisdictions on calendar years. So that was the reason for my hesitation. But so this appointment would go through June 30, and then July 1 or in June, the consideration of the officers should occur.
Thank you for that clarification, Steve. With that in mind, and I've not overseen my own election before, so I apologize if this is a little bit awkward. I'd like to recognize that there are several people who've been nominated for vice chair, and through Steve and Amanda's clarification, this would be until June to end June 30th. And I would like to open up the considerations for those who have been appointed. We are allowed to have 2. And so I think I'd like to ask for clarification of this body. Should we have people nominated directly for both, or should we just nominate 2 people for vice chairs and let them talk about the spheres? How should we do this as a point of order?
Chair, if I may make a suggestion.
Yes, sir, please do.
You could open nominations for a slate of vice chair. So the nomination would be for 2 vice chairs by a single nominator, and look for a second, and then continue nominations until you hear no more, and then close. That is an option.
Excellent. Is there Mayor Venice?
Yeah, I mean, I actually think, since we've made the point that we need chairs with specific roles, that we should do them one by one and accept nominations for the poverty vice chair, and then accept nominations for the homelessness, so they know what they're signing up for. And I just think it might be a little clearer for folks if
both points are well taken. Would anybody else like to chime in before making that request?
I'll just say that I agree with the mayor on that.
Thank you. I feel like that makes it simpler. If I'd like to look for head nods, and I got cameras now. Looking for head nods. Do people support us doing individual nominations?
Yes.
Excellent. So I would like to open up the floor for nominations for vice chair on homelessness. I personally would like to nominate Brittany Quick Warner as a vice chair on homelessness.
I'll second.
Is there anyone who would like to offer another nomination? We have Brittany Quick Warner as a second. Hearing none, I'd like to, she did say that she would have to leave the meeting shortly, but if she was nominated for a position that she would accept, we can call this matter to a vote. All in favor for Brittany Quick Warner to be vice chair on homelessness for the Poverty and Homelessness Board until June 30th, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any noes, please signify by saying nay. Hearing none, motion carries, and Brittany Quick Warner is the current vice chair for homelessness. Would like to open up the floor for nominations for vice chair of poverty. This would end June 30th. Looking to see if there's any hands up.
So I'll just chime in that it looks like several people suggested Pat Farr. I wonder if Commissioner Farr, are you interested in serving in that role? Would you accept the nomination?
Mayor Vanessa, I accept the nomination, yes.
Well, then I will nominate Commissioner Farr to serve as vice chair of poverty.
I'll second that. Julie.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Madam Mayor. Is there anybody else who would like to, of those who are nominated to be a vice chair, would anybody like to be considered? Hearing none, I'd like to close nominations and call to question. Does this body recognize Commissioner Farr to be the second vice chair representing poverty issues for the remainder of this term ending on June 30th? All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed, signify by saying nay. Hearing none, I welcome Commissioner Farr as the second vice chair of the Poverty and Homelessness Board and representing poverty, and Brittany Quick-Warner as being the vice chair of homelessness. And I thank everybody for their support in me being the chair for the remainder of this time, and support for these two great leaders to help us move forward on our agenda. So thank you, Julie and Pat, for both speaking to your points and considerations, and for helping pave this way. So looking forward for 2022. That said, let's move on to item number 6. Amanda?
Thank you, Chris. Just let me take a moment to share a new screen. All right, there we go. Hopefully everyone can see now the PowerPoint that I've put up. Can someone confirm?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, great. Sometimes with Zoom, I don't know which screen I'm sharing, so I want to make sure.
I totally understand.
All right. So again, I'm Amanda Borda, Senior Program Services Coordinator with the Human Services Division, and I act as our Continuum of Care lead. So I'm just going to go through quickly today the Hud COC Consolidated Application as we're getting ready to submit that. Just to keep in mind some action items that we're looking for, we are seeking approval today for 2 items. One is the final ranking, also referred to as our priority listing that was in your packet, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. We are also today looking for approval of our final draft and overall approval to submit the COC Consolidated Application on behalf of the COC. So I'll go through in some detail today, just some highlights from that application. I sent that out late yesterday, so I know folks might not have had time to review that in detail. But I'm just going to sort of go through some strengths and highlights of that application so that you're aware of the content. And then we'd be looking for a motion. So these can either be one motion to approve both of these together at the end or separately, however you guys want to do that. But just keep that in mind as we go through. So as I'm referring to the consolidated application, what we submit to HUD really consists of 2 parts. One is the priority listing, or also known as our ranking. And that actually includes several different listings: the renewal listing, new projects, planning, and reallocation listings. So that is where we submit our project applications for the individual projects that are funded through COC funds. And those are sent with the corresponding listing. So if they are renewals, they populate in that listing. If they're new, they populate in that one, etc. The other half of that is the COC application itself, which is really our grant application, where we have a significant amount of narrative, data, other things like that, and attachments that we have to submit to HUD that go with that other priority listing part. So that's what I'll go through today and what I sent out at the end of the day yesterday. All right, so that ranking or priority listing you have in your packet, we are looking for approval for that. All renewal and new project applications have been submitted. Those are required to be submitted 30 days prior to HUD's deadline, which is November 16th. So those have all been submitted in eSnaps and are now populating their corresponding listing. The ranking itself was completed on October 8th by members of the PHB Executive Committee and the RFP Eval HMIS Committee. We did sort of a hybrid committee this year because of the number of people on the RFP Eval Committee that actually receive COC funding or have otherwise a conflict. So we pulled in some members from the Executive Committee to participate in that discussion. Overall, HUD does require that we approve a ranking that is objective and considers the extent to which projects improve system performance. So we speak about that in our application and get points for that as well. So we typically, the group will approve a scenario. It's not really picking and choosing projects where they rank, but it's really approving sort of an overall scenario, and then we fill in based on that. So this year, the committee approved a pretty straightforward scenario. The system capacity projects, for us, that's HMIS at the top with renewals by performance. And we did average of 3 years of evaluation scores. We do the evaluation prior to the NOFO being released. So we've already completed that process. And we typically do an overall of average scores of several years just to account for any changes that might happen or an off year. We all know we had an off year in 2020 with COVID. So it's always best to kind of average multiple years just to account for things like that. And then followed by new projects with the PSH bonus first, followed by the DV bonus. And I can give more detail on those projects as well. We did have a very sort of last minute reallocation this year from our SPC Madrone Consolidated project of $232,381. That will not result in a reduction of units. They have additional money that they are unable to spend at the moment and are able to fully serve the units that they have in that grant with the funding that they have. And so they have chosen to voluntarily reallocate a portion of that. So that went to the committee as well. And that committee approved moving that over to the application for the NEL, which is our 1100 Charnelton PSH project, 45 units for chronically homeless individuals. And that uses project-based vouchers through Homes for Good. So the combined total you'll see in the ranking for that project is 429,136. And then that DV bonus project we're referring to as the Sunstone Rapid Rehousing Project. That will be 6 units for individuals and families of rapid rehousing, specifically serving survivors or those fleeing DV dating violence, sexual assault, or stalking. And that one's 142,490. So you'll see in the ranking that HUD this year provides for a percentage that falls in tier 1 versus tier 2. Tier 1 can be considered what you would say is safe, and tier 2 is if there was a situation where HUD did not have enough funding to support all projects. We are essentially telling them in what order we would want to fund our projects. And so they would start eliminating any at the bottom of tier 2. This year, tier 1 is equal to 100% of our renewals. So it really came down to where we wanted to place new projects for the most part. And the committee chose to prioritize our renewals first above our new projects. Are there questions about the ranking before I move on to the application itself?
Amanda, did you say that we had a document that had ranking in it? Because I can't find it. I see the application, the COC application, but I don't see the ranking. Did I miss? Am I just missing it?
Yeah, that should have been in your original packet.
With the agenda and the minutes?
Yeah. Let me see if I can.
Oh, I see. It's the last page.
It is the last
I
page.
apologize. I apologize. Yes, it's the last page. Okay. Thank you.
Are you seeing the ranking now on my screen there?
Yes.
Okay. Great. Any other
Thanks for bringing
questions?
that up, Julie, because I had not looked that far myself.
Any other questions about the ranking or how that process works? Okay. All right, hopefully folks can see back to my PowerPoint again. All right, so the COC application itself, it's a long document, so I certainly don't want to go through it in extensive detail. But I just want to sort of call out what information is in there and highlight some strengths that I think we have and some areas for improvement. So it's consisting of sort of 4 main sections. This first one, COC Structure and Governance, has quite a bit of information in it. It's sort of a collection of a lot of different things. But this first part really talks about our inclusive structure and participation and sort of how we structure our COC itself. So this board, the committees, and who participates in that structure. Strengths here that I think we have are that we do have broad representation of stakeholders, from service providers to funders to elected officials, people with lived experience. And so I think that's a real strength of our continuum. Not all continuums have that sort of broad representation, especially of elected officials at that level. And so I think that's really a strength of ours, and we typically score decently well in that area. The next part of that really focuses on our collaboration with our public housing agency. And that's additionally a significant policy priority of HUD's this year. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit too. So we have several questions here related to our coordination with the PHA, including whether we have general or limited preferences in place for individuals who are homeless, which we do, as well as our move-on strategies that we've implemented using PHA vouchers, which we have also done. So I think that's really a strength that we have here because we do work closely with our PHA Homes for Good on a variety of projects, and most recently worked together on our emergency housing voucher program, which we were able to also speak to that in the application this year as well. Many COCs have really struggled to coordinate with their PHAs, so I think this is really something that we can highlight as a strength. And even better that it's a newly added priority for HUD this year as well. The other, so like I said, this section really encompasses quite a few things. So this is sort of where they throw in a lot of different things. So in this section, you'll also see us talking about discharge planning coordination, housing first, which is a priority of HUD. And this year they did have more questions about how we really evaluate whether our projects are housing first, not just saying that they are, but how we really look at that. So we were able to speak to that. Street outreach, I think this year's strength is that we have expanded our street outreach efforts and coordinated those at a system level much better than in previous years, just based on our TAC recommendations and our system improvement work. So I think we were able to say a lot more this year about our street outreach efforts, which is great. We have increased our rapid rehousing inventory, which we get points for that. And then we also answer questions about our coordinated entry system and how we coordinate around mainstream benefits and other assistance such as healthcare. So you'll see details in that section there. As we've discussed previously, racial equity is a primary focus area for both Lane County and for HUD. There's an increasing emphasis on assessing racial disparities in access and outcomes when it comes to housing and homeless services. So in the application, we speak to sort of the assessments that we've done for racial disparities and the results of that. So whether those disparities are present in our system. And then we also speak to what our strategies are to address them. So I think in a lot of ways, we're really at the beginning part of that conversation locally. I think there's a lot more work to do on racial equity, but we're actively taking those steps in the right direction. We are doing our racial equity analysis, but I think now we need to start talking about sort of what steps we take to address those disparities, and we're starting to do that. Active participation of people with lived experience is a new priority as well for HUD this year. Unfortunately, the question that they included here is really limited. We had to put in simply a number of people that engaged. So I sent out a survey to kind of gather what that number is. So it's pretty limited. We just get the opportunity to put in a number, and it doesn't give us the opportunity to speak to all the great work that League is doing, for example. So we try to insert that in other questions as we're able to kind of highlight that work. So hopefully in the future, you know, it'll be more of a narrative that we can provide there, because I think they're doing a lot of great things. A new section this year obviously is around addressing COVID-19 for people experiencing homelessness. So we were able to highlight many things we've done to address the pandemic since March of 2020. This section includes safety protocols, how we met immediate needs, how we coordinated on the distribution of funding with ESGCV CARES Act funding. It also asks us to speak to our coordination with mainstream health partners and vaccination strategies, as well as possible increases in DV as a result of the pandemic, as well as how we improve readiness for future public health emergencies. So there's a lot of information there, probably way too much to fit within the character limits that we're given, unfortunately, but we tried to really cover as much as we could in that space. And we received some input from Sarai Johnson and from Lane County Public Health. Elizabeth Miglioretto was able to provide a lot of information in detail for this section. And then DV agencies, Hope and Safety Alliance and Sayusla Outreach Services were also able to provide some information about how they work to address those possible increases in DV as well. In this project review and ranking section, we have to speak to a lot of deadlines and dates for public postings and how we sort of process through the review and ranking. And so for this section, we have to enter the dates that we completed certain required tasks through HUD. HUD also requires attachments to verify some of those dates with timestamps. So these do impact our score, which is why you'll always find me being very strict about timelines within the competition period, and much of that is required by HUD. So we do talk a lot about our review and ranking process in this section, and that really starts with our local evaluation, which we refer to as our local competition as well, where renewal projects indicate their intent to renew, and we evaluate their performance based on those objective criteria I mentioned. So we need to speak to that in this section here. I think one area to improve upon, again, is racial equity in this process. So there was a new question here about how we incorporate racial equity into our ranking and review process of our projects. We utilized a condensed version of our evaluation this year, so we did not add racial equity aspects to it, but I think that's something we will have to talk about for next year's evaluation. The HMIS and data collection section is pretty straightforward. It really just asks about our implementation of HMIS and our bed coverage. We do have 100% bed coverage in HMIS, so we're strong in that area. But I think one area we could use some improvement on is our collaboration with our DV agencies on the use of comparable databases and be able to sort of bring those data together. And that's something they've emphasized with the DV bonus opportunity. So we had to speak to that pretty extensively in this application. Lastly, there's system performance section. This section remained the same as previous years. We really speak to how we meet these system performance measures each year. And they did de-emphasize performance in scoring this year. It's a less percentage of our score, just due to COVID, but they did make it clear they anticipate significantly increasing those points in future competitions. So they kind of gave us a little bit of a break this year. Our narratives really here highlight a lot of our system improvement measures that we've taken as a result of the TAC recommendations, as well as expansion of housing opportunities like MLK, the NEL, our diversion efforts, the anticipated navigation center. So we tried to highlight a lot of that work here and those strategies and how they impact system performance. I've already talked a little bit about this at the beginning with the ranking, but we have to speak to our PSH bonus project that we're submitting. For us, that's the NEL. There were also 10 points available here for bonus points, which increase your chances of getting your PSH bonus project. There are 5 points for leveraging PHA or other housing resources, and 5 points for leveraging healthcare funding. So the NEL does have project-based vouchers, so we were able to put that commitment in. We anticipate getting those 5 points. The healthcare leverage commitment is not yet secured, but we're still going to work on that for the next week that we have to finish this. And we're hoping we might be able to sort of pull a Hail Mary on that one at the end, but we don't have anything as of this date. The DV bonus section, we have to speak to quite a bit in order to apply for the DV bonus. This pot of money is a separate pot of money that was set aside through Congress specifically for DV. And so they have a long list of questions that we had to answer about how, what our experience is in providing housing placement for DV survivors and how we ensure safety of survivors, as well as how we provide trauma-informed and victim-centered approaches. And so there's a whole long section. I think there's still some work over the next week we will do to sort of tweak this section and improve it. So this might be where you might see some edits. But for the most part, the application is complete. So I know that was a lot of information all at once. Are there questions or discussion points or anything I can clarify within the application itself?
Amanda, just for quick clarification, in summary, what does this pay for?
Sure. So that ranking that you see in your packet, all of those projects that are included there receive COC funding or will if we get them awarded the new projects. So in total, if we are awarded the new project, that equals about $4.4 million that we are applying through this year through the application. That includes planning funds that support staff at Lane County as well.
Awesome. Are there any questions for Amanda about this process or about this document? Julie.
So I'm a little confused about the ranking on tier 1 and tier 2. So, you spoke a lot about the DV bonus money and that it's new money in addition to outside of it, and yet it's ranked the lowest. And so I'm trying to figure out how that ranking gets submitted. I mean, will HUD look at this and just kind of ignore the lowest rankings and focus primarily on the high, or how you prioritize the renewals, but not the new? So I'm just trying to get an idea of how does this get viewed when the DV bonus of brand new money is the lowest possible ranking?
Yeah, so the ranking is tricky. So like I said, we're required to separate it into tier 1, tier 2. Those amounts are fixed. So the amount in tier 1 is equal to the amount of renewal money that we are applying for our annual renewal demand. In past years, it's been less. It's been, 94, 93%. So there are some times when renewals will fall into tier 2 as well, but this year it is 100%. So it really came down to where to put the new projects. And what we're essentially saying is, do we want to prioritize those above renewals and risk losing a renewal project that exists in order to get a new project? I will say, as far as the DV bonus, it is unique because that is a separate pot of money allocated. They will actually, the way that the ranking process works, HUD will review that first. And if the DV bonus project is selected for DV bonus money, it is actually removed from the ranking and will be funded separately. If it is not funded with DV bonus funds, it remains in the ranking and will be considered for any other bonus funding available, if that makes sense. It's sort of a complicated process.
Okay.
So the committee weighed sort of where to put the new projects and ultimately decided to prioritize renewals and then new projects below that in that order.
Excellent. Does that answer your question, Julie?
I guess so. I know that we haven't received DV bonus money before, so I was just curious if it had to do with ranking. So I'm just naive to the process. That's okay. I'll get it figured out and learn more.
They will.
I'd be happy to. Oh.
HUD will score the DV bonus project based on the responses that we put that I talked about in the COC application. we will receive a score based on those questions. So it is looked at separately and scored separately from the other projects.
So pretty much criteria decides and funding and where the extra monies or allocated monies come from can help determine where a ranking is or whatnot. And tier 1 versus tier 2 takes some getting used to, but I'd be happy to sit down with any member or anybody in particular and share what it's been like to do the rankings multiple years in a row so that there's a better understanding about where it goes and how it happens. So that's a resource I'm willing to share with any member here. Commissioner Farr.
Thank you, Chair. And Julie, great question regarding the bonus money. And my assumption, and correct me, Amanda, if I'm incorrect, my assumption is that everything in tier 1 and tier 2 we should reasonably expect to be funded.
I will say we can reasonably expect tier 1 is typically not at risk. Tier 2 is essentially funded if it meets all criteria for scoring. So it meets their minimum threshold and that we are competitive. So those new projects are competitive across COCs. And really the scoring depends on some of the questions that we answer within the narrative portion.
Okay, that gives me reasonable confidence then.
Yeah.
The second thing I'll mention is that the Board of Commissioners on Tuesday of next week will be approving distribution of $3.5 million from HUD for youth projects, which is a CFC funded project, but that's beyond this 4.4 that we're applying for. So that has already occurred, is that correct?
So yeah, the YHDP Youth Homeless Demonstration Program grant, right now we're in the community planning process. So we don't quite have that money yet, but we'll be able to apply for projects under that funding once we complete our community plan. And then upon renewal of those projects, it will be through the COC process. So it's a little bit ways down the road, but they will, if we renew those projects, they will be part of our COC grant down the road.
That is perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Chair McAllister.
Thank you, Amanda, for sharing this important information. I'm jumping to cameras to see if I have any other hands raised. Are there any other questions regarding this process and its importance to what we're trying to do at the county before we vote to approve these items? And Amanda, did you say that there is no reason to vote on these separate, or is there a particular reason we might?
Typically it is a separate vote. It just depends on whether there would be discussion about one versus the other. But if you want to, someone could make a motion to approve both if there's no likely discussion.
Okay, I'm open to entertaining a motion to either do them separate or together. Open that to the speaker. Would anybody like to make a motion to approve the COC final rankings and to approve the final draft and submission of the Continuum of Care Consolidated Application?
I move we approve both in this vote.
Thank you, Mayor Venice. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Motion moved by Mayor Venice, seconded by Commissioner Farr. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Thank you. Please signify by saying nay if you disagree. Sean Murphy has announced that she believes she needs to abstain. And so with that in mind, we have all in favor except for one abstention of those who voted. Motion carries. Thank you, Amanda, for all this hard work.
Yeah, so next steps is that we will work over the next week. We'll only be sort of tweaking the draft a little bit, editing here and there, make sure it, the narrative flows. But if you have any feedback over the next week, feel free to send that to me if you read it. And then we'll be routing that for signature and submitting that in by mid-November.
And thank you, Amanda, for that. And one thing I would also like to bring forward to this body is if we do a process that is confusing, if we do something that you'd like to know more information on, or if you're not part of a committee and you see something that a committee has recommended, let us know and we'll arrange a training or a walkthrough to explain what this is about. I support informed consent, and our staff do a lot of hard work that's sometimes hard to keep up on. And so please feel free to reach out to myself or the staff in regards to like the COC rankings, or why do we do tier 1 versus tier 2. It's worth knowing. So thank you very much. I will get back to the agenda. We have data and analytics with Dana from the county.
Hello, Chris. Thank you. If somebody could make me a presenter, I'm going to just share, and I'll keep this brief because I know we're running towards the end of time. So I'm going to try to keep this brief as possible, so you can move on to public comment.
And that's a great segue real quick. If anybody would like to speak in public comment, feel free to put your name in the chat, and you'll have the remainder of our time.
Dana, you should be a co-host at this time.
Okay, yep, and it says it will allow me to share. Is everybody able to see the homeless housing shelter inventory in Lane County information page? So I'm David Davison. I work with Lane County under quality and compliance, and I'm a senior data analyst and data team lead. And I work closely with the Human Services Division data and analytics team and Lisa Stewart. This homeless housing shelter inventory in Lane County report has been published and available for your guys' viewing for a while now. And we accept and encourage lots of feedback, and through that feedback, we have made some adjustments. So I just want to present those changes in this report. And Lisa Stewart, can you add the link to this report into the chat while I talk?
Will do.
So the parts that we made some adjustments to is our emergency alternative shelter and the way that it's presented in this report. One of the things that was asked in different ways, but we came to a conclusion that was going to be most optimal, is to present the drop-in type shelters as separately and in a way that was very clear to the people who are looking at it. So this report is available to the public, to the Poverty and Homeless Board, and really was designed to help you guys look at the inventory that we currently have. So I'm only going to touch on the 3 dashboards that have been adjusted, and that's the emergency shelter dashboard, the alternative shelter dashboard, and the all drop-in shelters. So emergency shelters, you will see there's 3 different kind of groupings within that dashboard. One is the drop-in, which is the beds are filled from a wait list that usually projects will maintain on site. And it is possible to stay at a drop-in shelter on the same day the shelter is sought, limited by the availability and the number of people seeking shelter that day. So that is kind of that drop-in option. And then there's the programmatic shelters, which are available to people who have gone through through a screening process in order to be eligible into those emergency shelters. And then there's also motel vouchers in the emergency shelter area or section. And then alternative shelters has also the drop-in and the programmatic option under there. And then so those are 2 different dashboards. Then the 3rd dashboard, which is the all drop-in shelter, is going to pull out those drop-in areas that are also shown in the emergency shelter and alternative shelters and presented together, so we can have this high-level look at just how many drop-in beds or units are available to the community. So I'm just going to go and kind of show you quickly these 3 dashboards. The first one is going to be the emergency shelters. And so we've added at the top, it used to just have a total for all of that type, and then a list of all of the projects below. We've broken them out to be able to look at each subsection that we have created. So there's the all in emergency shelters, then there's going to be the programmatic, the drop-in, and then the motel vouchers. And then you'll see, again, those individual projects down below broken into those areas. And then again, the monthly averages over time. So you get a look at the past year and the numbers and the change over time. So it's just slightly different, same information, just presented in a way that that was asked for by members of this committee and also, or this board, and then also the Homeless Services Commission and some other comments that came from people who view this report. And then the alternative shelters is set up similarly, where you can see the total for all of the alternatives, then the drop-in, the programmatic, and again, the projects down below and the trend over time. And then the new one is really this drop-in shelter. And I like to really point out that this is not in addition to the other dashboards. Like the drop-in shelters that are shown on the other dashboards are pulled out and then presented on this dashboard specifically so we could look at it as a whole. So the total number of beds available on a drop-in basis, broken out by alternative drop-in and emergency drop-in. And then those projects that are listed under there. And then the monthly average and trends over time for those. So I know that was really quick. And what I do highly recommend is please go take a look at these reports, give us feedback. We've already received some feedback and some additional asks around these, and we ask for that all the time. And what I'll show you is on the introduction page, towards the bottom of these descriptions, is the email address for the HSD data analytics team. And that email, please send any comments, questions, asks, any of that to that email address. And we try to respond individually and then also make adjustments like we have in this report, on this report and other reports that are going to be coming available. And I'll stop there because I know it's running low on time.
Yes, Mayor Venice. Thank you very much, Dana.
Yeah, thank you. I just, a couple of comments. I, first of all, just really want to thank you for this work. That was pretty fast and I loaded it up and I'm trying to track it. And the issue that is of such concern to us is underutilization. It looks like in the final chart that that when you consolidate them all, there's pretty high level of utilization. It looks like in some of the other pieces, the utilization is not quite so high. So I'm going to have to look at it more carefully to understand why that looks so different. And maybe I'm just not reading it properly. The gray is.
Yes, the gray is the underutilized.
Underutilized.
Unutilized.
Yeah. So it's saying here, it's saying it's that we have just under 77% utilization.
Yes.
Okay.
And that is, and you can, that is broken down 92 beds from programmatic and 3. And there are some caveats to when the data gets entered into HMIS. So this data is pulled directly out of our HMIS system. So this data, that is where it comes from and when it's documented. So sometimes there is a delay in some of these programs getting filled up once they open. So there's always that consideration, which is why we list the projects in here. So that we can identify, you know, if it is a new project or if there's some lag in data entry on that.
So I actually have a follow-up request for this committee for a future agenda item related to that. So we have talked in the past about a survey and understanding why programs are underutilized when we have so many people who are unsheltered in the community. We also heard in the Shelter Stakeholder Committee meeting a couple of weeks ago from at least one provider, a community supported shelters, that they are not able to fill up to capacity because the people they're serving are such high need that they don't have the staffing to meet that need. And I think it would be instructive for this committee to have a presentation. Oh, and then it was a suggestion actually, and then there was a suggestion from Dan Bryant, actually, Square One, who's I think is on this meeting now, saying that that one model to look at would be to have mental health workers that are not necessarily associated with a specific provider, but would be serving all of the providers who are serving this community more broadly, And I think it would be instructive for us as a board to hear from Lane County Behavioral Health about how they deliver those mental health services, and if and what those plans are to expand those services, and how that might correlate to our need to build capacity and the challenge that our providers have around the staffing with that particular mental health expertise. So this is my request based on that data and other things we've heard, that for a future agenda item for this board.
Thank you, Mayor Venice. I think that we can certainly make that happen. Catherine Ryan said that there's also work being done around traditional healthcare workers that could fit into that conversation with the CCOs that can chime in on. So we'll certainly move that forward for our agenda planning. Thank you, Mayor, on that. And Richard Self, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to briefly say, because I know we're going into overtime, that's wonderful work with that graph there and all of that information, and it inspires me. And in regards to what the mayor was just saying, I think I propose that there in the near future there be a provider dashboard updated if possible daily, so that it can relay this kind of information to every provider. This would coincide with a project that League is working on and other things in regards to a roadmap. But I think a provider dashboard, much like the news info network, which is updated every day, that something like that, which could relay this type of information, staffing shortages, unavailable beds, what was it, at least last week or a little while ago, Looking Glass was temporarily closed, this type of thing. I'll yield at that.
Thank you, Richard, for both calling out the important work that League is working on with the roadmap, and also trying to find ways to tie in for more information and making it out there in a timely manner that helps people. So thank you for your voice. We are at time. I asked if there's anything else that people need to put forward, to please send myself or sorry, I believe it's going to be Diana for now. I understand that Alex Dreer is not going to be staffing this committee after the end of the month, and so I'm unsure of who will be doing that. But until we figure that out, please reach out to myself or Diana with any agenda items that we'd like to cover, such as what the mayor brought forward. I really appreciate everybody's contributions to this body, and the work that is going to really define where we go forward on the next couple of years due to conversations that happen here and in your committee work. So thank you for your vote of confidence, and thank you for joining the October PHB All Members meeting. Hope you have a great rest of your day. Meeting adjourned.